Is the world about to go through a financial revolution that will change the way economies work around the world? Join us as we look into the question that people all over the world are thinking about. Is this the end of the US dollar? From rising global tensions to new digital currencies, international finance is going through changes that have never been seen before. What does this mean for your savings, investments, and the US dollar's role as the world's main currency in the future? Stay tuned as we explore the intricacies of this important moment in economic history and find out what it might mean for people and countries alike. An important economic and political term refers to the fact that one country has a lot of power over how the international monetary system works. For this to happen, four things must be true. First, the state must be able to access international credit. Second, it must have foreign exchange markets. Third, it must be able to handle its balance of payments issues in a way that lets the hegemon operate without any balance of payments restrictions. And fourth, it must have the direct and absolute power to enforce a unit of account that is used for all economic calculations in the world economy. Many people today think of the US dollar as the most well-known cash in the world. This hasn't always been the case, though. After World War II ended and the Bretton Woods system was put in place, the US dollar became the world's main reserve currency, and other currencies were tied to it at fixed exchange rates. This meant that the US took over as the world's leading currency, replacing the British pound, which had been the leading currency since the gold standard was introduced in 1871. It means that the dollar is the currency of currencies, or the one that other currencies are measured against. It is very important for the world economy that a currency is widely used. The US dollar is one example of a currency that is widely used. Some people say that it helps keep prices stable because it only depends on one currency instead of many. One of the reasons money was made, though, was so that everyone could use the same unit of measure for deals and barter would be obsolete. On the other hand, it's not always clear that the US has more benefits because its currency is the most important one. Geeta Gopinath, who works for the International Monetary Fund, and Jeremy Steen wrote a paper in 2021 in which they talked about how much world trade is done in US dollars and how banks outside of the US give dollar-denominated deposits. Also, a lot of businesses outside of the US borrow money in dollars. This is because central banks keep a big chunk of their funds in dollar assets, and while it hasn't been proven for sure, interest rates tend to be lower when borrowing dollars than when borrowing other currencies, all other things being equal. It may seem like this is a very important benefit, but the benefits the US gets from having the most important currency are not clear. People think that the biggest benefit is that they can run big deficits because other countries will always accept the dollar. Of course, we can see that some other countries can have even bigger deficits than the US when we compare them to their GDP. As an example, Canada and Australia have bigger deficits than their economies should have, and their currencies, the Canadian dollar and the Australian dollar, have never been used outside of their own economies. Some people also say that the US could borrow money for less money because dollar bonds are seen as better investments. There are a lot of things that can change interest rates, and there isn't a big difference between how much it costs to borrow money in the US and other rich countries. As people worry about the end of the dollar's power, there is a good reason for it. It's strange and exciting to say that your currency is the chosen one, which makes it seem like it has value. But the truth is that, if you look at the numbers, that fact doesn't mean much. Now that we've talked about how important it is for a country to have the world currency, let's talk about how that supremacy is doing. The word de-dollarization and how bad it could be for the US economy have been talked about a lot in the last few years. It means that the US dollar is no longer the most important reserve currency. This is called de-dollarization. This phrase has been used by people who are very interested in Bitcoin and people who support Putin and want the US to face results for its role in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But besides people who may be swayed by outside factors, there are also authoritative voices that have recently raised worries about this subject. Fareed Zakaria, an Indian-American expert on international relations, has already said that he is worried about this problem and that the dollar might lose its position as a superpower. There have been signs that moving away from the dollar might be possible. Saudi Arabia's idea that the Chinese yuan could be used as payment for oil and Elon Musk's statement that the US use of the dollar as a weapon against Vladimir Putin has sped up the process of de-dollarization are both facts that support this claim. Looking at the numbers, though, we can see that the dollar's position as the world's reserve currency hasn't changed at all over the past 20 years. This suggests that a drop in the dollar's standing is very unlikely in the near future. Even so, there is another reason why we might think the US dollar is weakening. Countries usually keep a lot of dollars on hand as a safety net in case the economy goes down. According to statistics from the Federal Reserve, the number of dollars that countries hold has slowly gone down, from 71% in 2000 to 58% in 2022. This shouldn't be a big problem for the dollar because the drop in dollar reserves is spread out among several smaller currencies instead of being centered on one strong one. Also, the private sector, which makes up most of the dollar's foreign dominance, has stayed steady at about 88%, which means that 7 out of 8 transactions are done in dollars. When the Fed puts all of this information together, they get a measure that shows the US dollar has no competition. Since the US dollar is used to buy and sell other currencies, it looks like it will continue to be the most important currency. The fact that the US dollar is used for so many deals makes it even more valuable. More transactions mean more cash, which makes the dollar even more valuable. Because of this, deals strengthen the dollar's role as a medium of exchange. Local currencies can still be used for deals within the same country, but dollars are usually needed for transactions with other countries. When people go to another country, they don't try to speak their own language. Instead, they work hard to learn English because it is now used all over the world. Charles Kindleberger, an economist at MIT, came up with this comparison, which perfectly shows what is happening with the US dollar. It's clear that the idea of other currencies, especially the Chinese yuan, replacing the US dollar is not likely to happen after looking closely at the reasons for the talks on de-dollarization. It's just as unlikely as thinking that people would start speaking Chinese out of the blue when they go abroad. There is some evidence that China's GDP is higher than the US and that China exports more than the US. However, these facts do not seem to be enough to make the yuan the new world currency. China has capital controls that make it hard for money to move freely in and out of the country. This makes the yuan's case special. It is hard to understand why someone would want to hold a currency that makes them uncertain instead of one that doesn't. Things don't last forever, which is important to note. Like how the British pound lost its power over time, it's possible that the US dollar will eventually lose its power too. But there aren't any strong signs that this will happen soon. The main reason for this is that there aren't any better options that could work as well as the US dollar as a world currency. Some people think that cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, might be able to fix some of the problems with standard money. This idea will only be proven true or false over time. Stay informed and stay ahead of the curve with our channel. Subscribe now to never miss out on the latest insights and updates on the future of global finance and the US dollar. Secure your financial future by staying connected with us.